Welcome to another edition of the Go Long Show. We are going to be talking about strength training and all of the questions that people may be intimidated to ask. We're going to say, let it rip here today. And we're going to answer the questions. And who I have with me is Bianca Carbone. She is the founder of Blix Fitness. She's based in the Philadelphia area, and we're still going to be friends, even though she's an Eagles fan and I'm a New York Giants fan. We're still finding a way to build bridges and collaborate together. Bianca is a partner of Go Long, meaning I send clients her way because I really like her approach to how she works with people and how she treats them and how she meets them where they are. So with that, Bianca, why don't you go into a little bit about your backstory and how you got to where you are today?
Well, first of all, go Eagles. Sorry, Jill, I had to throw that out there. Second of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. And I love being a partner of Go Long. So me in a nutshell, I've always been into health and fitness. I can remember from the youngest age, I'm jumping around in my bedroom, I'm listening to Katy Perry and Pink, and I'm making up workouts to their songs. So I feel like I've just always loved to move my body. Like that's just me. I'm a firecracker. Moving on into high school, I've always played competitive sports. My brother got me into weightlifting, and I think like that first day learning how to squat, I fell in love with gym. I loved the environment, I loved the whole vibe, and I enjoyed building muscle. I don't know what it was. I just felt super drawn to it. Going into college, I still played all the sports. Now I'm coming into CrossFit. I'm walking more. I'm doing all the things 7 days a week. That's where I met with bang. You got too much going on, girl. You gained 20 pounds. You got a face full of acne. You're gaining weight. Like, what is going on here? Which that's when I learned a lot about overtraining, the symptoms of things like high cortisol, how that can impact your hormones as a woman, and how sensitive we are to external stressors, especially overtraining. I learned all about macronutrients, micronutrients, and I basically honed in on my nutrition. Then throughout college, things were up and down. College was a very turbulent time for many people. COVID happened when I was in college. Coming into nowadays, I had a recent diagnosis of PCOS, so I still was experiencing my own hormone problems. Throughout that journey, I started coaching other people. Men and women of all ages, and now I'm on this journey to help women build muscle, manage their body weight, burn body fat, have a better hormone balance, reducing, irregular cycles, PMS symptoms, hot flashes, all the fun things that women have to deal with. And here I am with Chill. So I hope that was enough. That was very long-winded.
No, that's great. And I think that, for someone, who is a relatively recent college graduate, you've certainly been through a lot on the health journey. So it's easy for people to kind of look at you on, say, an external level and think that, oh, this girl is really, fit and she hasn't experienced a lot. But, you have gone through what I would consider to be abnormal hormonal changes relatively early in your life. And so maybe we could talk a little bit about how your story and how you translate that into how you approach clients, like your empathy for when you feel like you're doing all the right things and your body is telling you, yeah, I don't like that.
You're so right, Jill. I think especially when I was younger, I would go back onto my consultation calls, and I would even have people straight up ask me, and they're like, well, how is a 21-year-old gonna help a 50-year-old do blah, blah, blah. And I felt like at the time, like I was still very naive, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? But it's okay because we all have our own journeys of self-growth. So it's not saying that I couldn't help somebody build muscle and burn fat and do all the things. So that's all very science-based. But where I think my unique perspective has come into place is experiencing those such terrible, I would say, hormonal shifts over the past couple of years. I mean, having irregular cycles, like that's something that a lot of women will start to experience in like perimenopause, where like one time they're going to get their period for like 28 days and the next cycle is like 50 days and then it's 60 days. And as we all know, that's going to come with its own hormonal symptoms of the night sweats. And now you're having irritable, thinking, you have brain fog, you have mood swings, like all of those things are things that I experienced, and I almost felt like no one was taking me seriously, and they make fun of me, and they're like, "Oh, like what are you, like 50? Like why are you?" I'm like, literally, I feel like I'm 50 because what I'm explaining is exactly what perimenopausal women like say they're going through, except I'm 20, 22, 23 years old going through those things. I mean, things really started to shift. I was always dealing with the regular cycles, just trying to shift my diet around, do seed cycling, like try different type of micronutrients, and literally nothing I was doing was working. And then one summer I had an ovarian cyst rupture. And I don't know if you've ever had one or if anyone here has ever had one, but I am like, the day I get my period, I'm sprawled out on the ground. I'm at my aunt's house. I slept over the night and I'm like screaming in agonizing pain. I'm shaking on the ground. It's like 7 a.m. I'm basically blacking out and I'm passing out from this pain. And I had no idea what was happening. I was so scared. Nobody was there. And like my uncle comes over and he's like, "Is your pancreas bursting?" And I'm like, "You don't understand. Like, you're a man." I'm like, "Good now." And it was just this situation. I took so much like pain relief and naproxen, and it finally resolved itself out. And then I go to the gynecologist, like, when I could, 2 weeks later, and she was like, "Oh, well, hopefully it's just a fluke thing." Lo and behold, a couple of months later, I felt like I was developing a hernia in my lower pelvis because it hurt when I was deep squatting. It hurt when I was rotating. It hurt when I was planking. So I
So
physically could
can
not
I
work
just ask
out.
you a question? Because this is
Yeah.
actually really interesting.
Yeah.
So you were how old at the time when this happened?
23.
So you're
Yeah, I was 23.
23 years old. It definitely seems unusual, and they didn't do any scanning or anything of
No,
your
nothing.
pelvic region or anything.
No, she was like, "Well, I know you have like a regular cycle sometimes, and hopefully it's just a fluke thing. And if it happens again, just let us know." And
Wow.
I was like, I really try to stay patient, and I'm like, okay, well, sure, I'll just do what hopefully it is a fluke thing, because I never felt like I like identified myself as somebody who has something like PCOS or somebody who has an ovarian cyst. Like I was like, "Oh, that's not me." Like I looked them up on the internet. I'm like, "Yeah, no, that doesn't pertain to me." And for some reason, I just never connected the dots. And I don't know if that's just me having an ego or like what was up with that time frame, but I just never thought that that was me. I don't know how to explain it, because I felt like labeling myself as somebody with the condition who is otherwise super healthy and fit and have a fitness business and like everything else is great on the outside. I'm like, yeah, there's no way I could have that. So whatever. But also at the same time, I got my blood work done and I had high cholesterol and I had high blood sugar. I didn't get an A1C done, but I had high blood sugar and high cholesterol. And my doctor was like, "Oh, well, because the ratios are fine between my good and my bad cholesterol, like you're going to be fine. And like, it's no big deal." And now I look back on it, I had the ruptured cyst. I had high blood cholesterol. I had high blood sugar. I had irregular cycles. I was getting maybe like 7 periods a year, which is really bad. And not one of my doctors drew any connections until it took me experiencing a hernia like pain for 7 months, almost going to a specialist for a hernia, to have another ruptured cyst in like February or March. And this time I was at home. So like my parents saw me and like my dad was about to call 911. Like it's the same situation over again. And I'm just so defeated at this point. I get an ultrasound. I'm like, "You know what? Screw this. I'm taking this into my own hands." Got an ultrasound, got a blood test. I'm in pre-diabetic range. I have polycystic ovaries. And they're like, "Yeah, like this is in alignment with PCOS." And at that point, I'm like, their first initial reaction was, "I want you to go on birth control. I want you to go on metformin. I want you to like take this, and that." And I'm like, "No, I'm so healthy. I do this, and this. You didn't ask me a single question about my lifestyle. Like I am I'm 24 now at the time, 25 now, but you're like, I'm supposed to be in the most healthy, vibrant time in my life right now. And you guys are just like brushing me off.
So I think that obviously that's a very compelling story. And the reason why I wanted you to talk about that is I wanted to talk about how even you having these experiences in college and then post-college, how that has impacted how you treat your clients. Like, because I met you through a gentleman who's in his mid 50s and travels a lot. And that's a story for another day for everybody else.
Yeah.
But the thing is that somehow you're able to create that connection, even though, you are very early in your career. And so maybe you could talk about how you create empathy, even though you haven't experienced. So like you haven't experienced, say, perimenopause, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean like you don't have empathy for the challenges associated with that. You may be working with a client who has brain chemistry issues. That doesn't mean, even if you don't have brain chemistry issues, that doesn't mean that you don't have empathy in terms of working with them. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. That's a great question. And you're right. I'm not a perimenopausal woman. I'm not a 50-year-old man. I don't have other types of problems. I don't even have endometriosis. I don't have thyroid problems.
This
There's
is
so many
good. This is
things.
good. You don't have those problems, by the way. I want to be clear.
Yeah, like it's fine. But I think what it made me realize is when I first started this journey and wanted to help other people, it was solely, I want you to feel confident. I want you to build muscle and burn fat. And that's cool if that's your goal. That's no problem at all. But when we pull back the onion peels and we pull back the layers, that's where we see the heart of what's really going on. Where most people do have something like endometriosis, or they have a thyroid problem, or they have bipolar or depression or anxiety, or they have high blood pressure. Like they have all of these things that it's not at the forefront of their mind, but it still impacts every single decision they make. It impacts every decision they make when they have a craving, when they have, they're around their period. And now this woman, she's struggling for 2 weeks every single month because she can't stick to the program, where I can come in there and be like, girl, I've had an ovarian cyst grow for 8 months. And this is how I was able to stay consistent with that. This is how I was able to go through the trials and tribulations and like emotionally accepting and attaching myself to a label of PCOS. This is how that impacted me. Here's how I got through it. And I think this can be applied to your journey in this way. So, it's important that I've taken a step back from working on my figure, working on body composition to prioritize my internal health. Because I think for me, like seeing my body change and witnessing the physical pain that's gone with it and how that impacted me mentally, emotionally, my relationships, like being in physical pain and having an intimate relationship, they don't bode well. So I feel like, the mood swings affecting how I'm able to interact with other people, my friends, like I think I'm able to just pull an overarching lesson and apply it to other people's journeys. And I think that makes me very, people feel comfortable talking to me about things that they don't realize are impacting their health.
Okay, that's really helpful. So let's talk a little bit about, at some point, probably most of the people you've worked with have tried some workout regimen. Regardless of how intensive it was or whatever it is, they've tried something, whether it's a couch to 5K, whether it's a free online program, whether it's something a lot more intensive. And for whatever reason, they had to stop. It could be an injury, it could be life getting in the way, it could be all sorts of things. So let's talk about how you meet people where they are. So that this way, because everyone's coming from different walks of life when they come to you.
Yeah, that's a great question, which is one reason why I don't do like anything cookie cutter, because I'm not going to sell you this program when I know that it's, I don't want to be just like every other trainer. Well, here's my 8-week program to build glutes. Like, I want to make something that's actually impactful and lasting for you. So what we do, or what I like to do, is we go through this whole intake process where I ask you about your schedule, your job, your routine. What do you do for breakfast? What are you doing at 5 p.m. on a random Friday or at noon on a Saturday? Like, I want to get to know you. And then from there, we take it backwards. I say, what are your goals? What can we realistically accomplish in the next 3 months? What have you done in the last year or two? Maybe we start here. Let's start with, for example, 3 workouts with the equipment you have at home that are 30 minutes, and then we're going to build you up to this. And we have weekly checkpoints where we talk about what's working and what's not working. Do you have any vacations coming up? Are you going to get faced with any of the stressors or similar things in the past that would have like knocked you off the horse? If so, here's a game plan of how we can prevent that from happening. So a lot of what I do is, yeah, I can give you the workouts with the right sets and the reps and the this and the that, but honestly, none of that matters if you're not able to stay consistent. So I initially help people stay consistent and just get that habit down where you actually enjoy going to the gym or working out and you miss it. So I want you to fall in love with the process and not just be solely focused on the end result, because once you like what you do and you feel good and you don't want to miss something, that's when you're actually going to see the weight loss, the weight management, and everything's going to fall into place after that.
All right. So as someone who a long time ago did not look forward to working out, and it took a while to get to that point, how do you work with someone who's kind of forcing themselves to stay consistent and to stay committed? Like, let's talk about, because it's hard. It's hard when you're first starting out. It's challenging to stay committed and excited because also, and truthfully, when I started 20 years ago, social media didn't exist. So when you're sitting there and you're struggling to stay consistent, and then the results don't happen as quickly as they're advertised, not by you, but by someone else on social media, how do you keep people engaged with that when they're not feeling positive?
That's a great question. And it's especially challenging too, being a remote trainer, because some of the people I work with are in different time zones. We don't communicate every single day. They don't see me in person. So but I try to be as close to you as I possibly can be. So whether that includes our weekly one-to-one call where we go through those mindset shifts that need to happen, where like you might hate working out, but we need to get deeper on why you think that you need to work out and why you think that it's going to take a month to see this result, when in reality, it's not going to be that easy. So I think during our calls, we do a lot of like myth busting. We do a lot of getting down to the deeper layers, your deeper motivators. How can we stay more consistent and motivated in these times? What are ways that we can rewire your thinking when I'm not with you? So if it's Friday night and you want to binge eat like you've done in the past, how can we prevent that so you can actually feel good the next day and want to stick to your goals? So I think, or something fun comes up on the weekend and you're just like, yeah, let me do it. How can we still prioritize fitness when you're traveling or you're out of your routine? So I would say we do a lot of personal strategizing during those calls, and then do a lot of reminders throughout the week. I check in. I'm like, hey, how'd this workout go? Or if I see you completed a workout, I send you compliments. Great job hitting your yoga class at 7:30 tonight. Like, this is fantastic. So I always try to add like a personal touch to everything I do, so they know it's me, it's not a robot, and that they always have like, someone in their corner that they can rely on.
So you talked about being a remote coach. And I also work with a remote coach, different coach. And how do you, because I know that when I started Go Long and I was sussing out this concept, a lot of women in particular got injured when they started strength training. So walk me through how you're focused, even though you're not in the room and you may be dealing with people who are relatively new to strength training. How do you keep people safe? Because obviously keeping safe is a pillar of staying consistent.
Yeah, 100%. We go through a whole list of like any previous injuries you've had or current limitations that you may have. And I usually start people off a lot easier than what I think they can handle after speaking with them. And they're going to message me, they're like, Bianca, this is way too freaking easy. Like, I could do this in my sleep. I'm like, okay, well, let's try this. Or other people will come back and they're like, this is the perfect level for me. And I'll go through, I'll ask specific questions about specific form cues. Like, for example, if we're looking at your RDL, I'm like, well, do you feel anything in your lower back? Do you feel like your shoulders are arching forward? Do you have any back pain?
What's an RDL? Sorry, there's
Romanian deadlift.
So you're doing a deadlift, a form of a deadlift, just for people who may not know what an RDL is, right?
Yeah,
and
you're
you're
supposed
just
to target
making
your hamstrings and your glutes.
right. So okay, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify that for
you're good. And then most people, I request that they send me some form videos from front angle, from side angle, and then I'll send them back a video, or we can hop on a Zoom call, or in our accountability calls, we'll just go through a couple of exercises together of ones that it's really important that they get it right. So like, I would say it's better, like you should prioritize doing a safer back squat, for example, than a safer bicep curl. So there's definitely a hierarchy of importance where you should really hone in on a certain form. So anyway, that's how we go through form there and make sure that they're safe. It's a lot of biofeedback. I don't like to make anything mandatory because some people just aren't comfortable yet getting on camera and sending videos or doing things through Zoom. So I always just say you have to exercise with caution. Here's how you can progress or regress the exercise. I'd like to see your form by this date.
Another thing that I think is important is understanding how hard something is for someone.
Yeah.
Because especially, you talked about this with cycles earlier. There are certain times in a month, depending on where you are with your cycle, where a certain exercise might feel more difficult, say when you're PMSing, versus like say in the first 2 weeks post having your period.
Yep.
So is that something that you find important, is understanding like how someone felt during the exercise?
Yeah, definitely. And I have worked with a lot of people too who track their sleep, or they have something like an Aura ring or a Fitbit that says your recoverability rate is blah. And like some days they message me in the morning and they're like, hey, my band told me that I am only 20% recovered today. Like, what do you think I should do? And then I'll ask them a series of questions. I'm like, well, do you feel sore? Do you feel brain fog? Do you feel lethargic? Like, how do you feel? Like, first of all, let's put the band aside. How do you feel? The second thing is a lot of the women I work with are on a contraceptive or a hormone where they're not necessarily getting those highs and lows throughout the month. So for those women, usually they don't have any differences between the phases because they're not cycling. For the women who are cycling, we go through, okay, when is your next period coming up? What was your previous period like? Can we alter your nutrition so that we can prevent some PMS? That's first. The second thing is, okay, you're there, you're cramping, you're tired. Here's how we can still help with progressive overload, but not break your body in half with throwing up a lot of weights. So maybe I say this time, instead of focusing on more weight, we can reduce the weight and do more reps. We can go through tempo. We can focus more mobility. We can try different variations. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can still continue seeing progress while altering just small variables here and there.
One of the things that you brought up was PMS and nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And, people have PMS to varying degrees.
Yep.
And so what are some of your suggestions around nutrition? If someone is entering the week before their period, sometimes you want to eat your feelings. A lot of times that's bread and cheese. At least it was for me when it was a thing. So some people it's chocolate.
Me.
So what would you advise to someone on this call who's like, yeah, I eat my feelings when I'm PMSing?
Yeah.
And if there is a way to kind of minimize that so that I can feel better, which means I could potentially work out better.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What would you advise?
Well, so for someone who's in a calorie deficit, if they're trying to lose weight, if that's right for them at this part of their journey, a lot of women think that they need to eat like less and cut from this like severe amount of calories, when in reality, you don't have to do that. And I think what a lot of women don't know is like the reason why you feel like you're the bottomless pit right before your period comes is because you burn more calories in your luteal phase or in your PMS phase than in the beginning of your phase. So you physically are hungrier because you're burning more calories. So that doesn't mean you should just like beat yourself up and you're like, oh, like, why am I so hungry? I must be doing this wrong. Girl, you're doing nothing wrong. It is just your body doing its thing. So if you're hungry, you should eat. Does that mean that you should go listen to all those cravings you're having? Not necessarily. Here's how we can remedy this. Maybe we increase your protein and your healthy fat intake during that week, and we keep your carbs relatively the same. So the reason why I don't want to increase your carbohydrates is because I don't want you to feel more inflamed than you already probably are. You might feel a bit more bloated than you already are. So eating things that are a lot more fibrous or just things that you can tend to overeat more on, I would suggest that you shy away from. So maybe we increase things like avocados or nuts and seeds or olive oil. Not to mention those things are high in magnesium, which is going to prevent some of your cravings, especially if chocolate is the craving, like me, because chocolate's high in magnesium. But anyway, maybe we can increase your healthy fat. We can seed cycle throughout your full cycle so that you're eliminating the excess hormones what you're supposed to and you're supporting healthy production. But I would say going out, staying up late, drinking all night, probably not the best idea if it's like the day before your period. Like, don't do that.
So then the other thing you brought up when you were talking about kind of approaches is progressive overload and tempo. And that leads me to one question that I think is the age-old question of what is better for building strength? Is it doing more reps with lighter weights or doing less reps with heavier weights? That is probably the number one question I get and I see. And so if you're dealing with a perimenopausal woman who's already going through starting to decrease their bone density and muscle mass, what is better? More weights, more weight, or more reps?
Great question. And the truth is, it's going to vary per person, where you've been, where you want to go. But in general, what I see the most is, first of all, there's a difference between strength and size and mass. And throwing up a heavy amount of weight doesn't necessarily mean that you have a lot of muscle on your body either. Like if you look at Olympic lifters or power lifters, most of them are not, they don't have the figure of a bikini competitor. So I think it depends on where do you see yourself for the next year? Like, what do you actually want to do? Do you want to build muscle and mass and like throw up some serious weight right now? Or do you want to have more of like a physique type of appearance or type of goal? And or do you have one of those with the sole goal of reducing your risk of osteoporosis and wanting to maintain healthy into like,
let's assume, just for argument's sake, that it's around preventing osteoporosis and it's about functional movement. Let's just assume it's not to compete in a competition or go crazy at CrossFit.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, keep it as simple. So I would say, first of all, the different rep ranges, anything that's above like the 12 to 15 rep range is going to land yourself in the endurance type of range, your muscular endurance type of range. Anything between the 8 to 12 rep range is going to be hypertrophy, where you're going for a combination of endurance and strength. And then anything that's between like the 4 to 6 rep range and below is going to be strength, pure strength. Okay, so I'll pause there.
Okay, so if you're in that looking for, like, again, to just like to stave off osteoporosis and to try and reduce the impact of losing estrogen, where you're losing muscle mass, right? Yeah. Is it the pure strength? Is it the hypertrophy? Or is it the endurance that's really going to help?
Yep. I would say your happy range is probably going to be in between a strength and hypertrophy range, where some exercises you're in that 4 to 6 rep range. Sometimes you go to the 8 rep range, and other exercises you're in between the 8 to 12 rep range. For example, your bicep curl doesn't need to be in the 4-rep range because you're only working this tiny little thing. That's a small muscle. Whereas if you're in a compound motion where you're doing a deadlift, you're doing a back squat, you're doing a bench, where you're working a big muscle group, you want to go into a lower rep range, not necessarily a 1-rep max. That's not necessarily safe or effective, whereas a 4 to 6 rep max is good. That lower rep range is going to help you build muscle, and that's what's important. A side tangent is, although I would suggest staying within the 1 to 12 rep range, what's more important is you're feeling like you're close to failure. So lifting 4 to 6 reps of a weight where you felt like you could actually do 8 reps with, that's not more effective than lifting the 8 reps just because you're lifting 4 reps. What's the most, like the top of the pyramid is being within like 2 to 3 reps of failure, where if you're going for 8 reps, for example, on a barbell back squat, you should feel like you are struggling on those last 2 to 3 reps. Like you cannot get to that 9th rep. That's more important than lifting 6 reps.
So the way I would kind of interpret that is, you want to go to a point where I'll call it you're keeping it honest, right? And so when you're selecting a weight, and that's just assuming good form and everything else, right, is that you want to get to a point where you feel like you've done the work and you're thinking in your head, okay, so let's say you assign 8 reps to someone. You want to pick a weight when you're at rep 5 where you're like, okay, I got like maybe 2 or 3 left in the tank and that's it. So that's kind of what you're saying. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then I love the fact that you talked about 1-rep max and how unsafe that can be. And I know why I think it's unsafe. In case you don't know, 1-rep max is that basically you just do 1 rep of something and it's like the heaviest weight you can lift. And your goal is to just do it once. And our previous coach, our current coach doesn't have us doing rep maxes, but our previous coach always had a minimum of a 3-rep max when we tested on certain things. The reason why people do rep maxes is to kind of benchmark themselves and see where they're at. Now, Bianca, why is a 1-rep max dangerous?
I think mostly because you can sacrifice your form, and that's just not worth the potential injury coming from it. Like, you can calculate what your 1-rep max is by doing something for 5 reps, even doing something for 12 reps. So unless you're like you're in the NFL and you're going for power and you're trying to like jump as high as you can or tackle this person over, like there's no point in doing a 1-rep max. And there's actually like their guidelines are getting updated in professional sports like that every single year, depending on injury and this and that. So for the average person, why would you sacrifice throwing out your back on a deadlift for 1 rep to see how heavy you can lift it, when you can have a much greater benefit by lifting 6 to 8 reps of a lighter weight, but you're still tearing down the muscle fiber? Like, it's not helping you in any way. There's only risk involved with doing it.
Yeah. I mean, basically, our mindset was you could do anything for 1 rep, which includes completely screwing up your neck and your back.
Yeah.
And ending up in needing PT or a chiropractor. And so, if you're doing 3 reps or 5 reps or just doing a regular set of 6 to 8 reps, it's a lot harder you're not as willing to like sacrifice your form to do that. So I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing that you brought up as well is around progressive overload and tempo. And a lot of times when someone is looking at an online training program, they see tempo and they see this combination of like 4 numbers with an X and everything else. So let's skip that and talk about tempo in a very simplistic way. When you're trying to explain tempo for the first time to someone, right? Well, maybe let's take a step back. Why does tempo matter? How does that contribute to building and maintaining muscle?
Great question. So tempo, simply put, For anything that comes up, it has to come down. For anything that comes forward, it has to come back. So the tempo is how quickly do you do those things? How quickly do you lower your arm in a bicep curl and then lift it back up? How quickly do you lower your body down to the ground and stand it back up in a squat? That's tempo. And then scientifically, it's eccentric, isometric, and concentric, but that doesn't matter. It's just going down, going up, and how long are you at the base holding the base of the squat, for example. So you can manipulate the effects of an exercise depending on how fast you go. How slow you go may have a better benefit for muscle growth. It increases your time under tension. It allows you to control the motion. It allows you to have better mind to muscle connection where you're actually feeling the exercise where you're supposed to feel it. It can just enhance what you're already doing. So you're getting more bang for your buck while you are working out.
You talk about a bicep curl. Let's talk about a squat. Because I'm pretty sure everyone on this call has attempted a squat at some point.
Yeah.
And so let's say you're holding not even a weight, you're holding like a can of beans in front of you and you're doing a squat. So there's the going down motion, there's the staying at like the lowest point you could be on the squat, and then there's coming back up.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about what value happens when you take, gravity, when you're going down, you can go down really quick.
Yeah.
Right? But when you're forcing yourself to go down slower, let's talk about what happens to your muscles and your bones when you're going down slower.
Yeah. I mean, I like to call that muscular control. Like when you're doing a squat, you don't just want to be like bouncing up and down unless you're doing like a squat jump, or the goal is to get your heart rate up, or the goal is to do as many as you can. If your goal is to feel the squat in your legs and you want to build muscle doing that with a light can of beans, you need to go slower because it increases your time under tension. You're slowly lengthening that muscle and you are improving the way that it works synergistically with the opposing muscle so that you're targeting it in a different way than if you were to go faster.
So like with a squat, you're talking about your glutes and your hamstrings.
Yeah.
As an example.
Yep.
So you're going down slowly, you're engaging both of those things for a longer period of time per rep.
Mm-hmm.
So then as opposed to going down, if you're doing 6 reps and you're just going down and up, let's say that's like 8 seconds of work. Whereas if you're taking your time and you're going down 2 to 3 seconds, right? Then you're talking about potentially 18 to 20 seconds worth of work per set that you're engaging that muscle group. Is that a fair way to translate it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can almost make what you're doing feel heavier as well. So even though you're only holding a can of beans, if you're going slow and you're holding at the base of the squat and you are really focusing on controlling that form instead of just bouncing up and down and bobbing, then that can of beans is going to feel much heavier than what it actually weighs.
I absolutely agree with that. I've experienced that myself, and I've given that advice to people that they say they don't have any weights at home, and I'm like, go get that can of beans and take your time going down.
Yeah, you got that weight. Or do a wall sit, like that isometric contraction where you're just holding your body weight in place. Your muscles are contracting all at the same time to keep your body still. Even that is a great and effective way to promote muscle building as well.
So can you just describe quickly what a wall sit is?
A wall sit, picture you have a wall next to you, you put your back against the wall, and then you hold a squat with your back leaning against the wall. You are just you're almost like sitting in a chair without the chair there against the wall. So you have all these forces acting on each other, and nothing can light up those quads like a wall sit can.
That is true. So then the other thing you talked about, which I love, and I think it's very important in every strength training program, and I want to like kind of make it more simplistic how we talk about it, is progressive overload. And you talked about this earlier. So perhaps you can explain in a simplistic way, what is progressive overload and how would it play out, say, over a 6-week cycle, a strength training cycle?
Yeah. Progressive overload means you're either increasing in weight lifted, in number of reps lifted over a period of time. But I would also argue that it's also your tempo. Can you lift it slower? Can you be more controlled? There's so many things that go into it. Your intensity, like all it really means is that you feel like you're getting stronger every single week than the previous week in different ways, whether it's going 5 pounds heavier, doing another rep, going 1 second slower on your eccentric. That's all it means. And it's just a measure of your progress.
They're not in big increments. Like
No.
the whole point of progressive overload is like very small percentages. Like we're talking like 2 to 5% in my experience. Is that right?
Yeah, even if it's a pound. Like some of my clients, they'll get really discouraged and like, well, I can't lift like 20 pounds heavier than the previous week. I'm like, I don't want you to. And you're gonna hurt yourself doing it anyway. Like you're doing a leg press, for example, you could just throw a 2.5 pound plate on there, and that's progressive overload because I know you can do 2.5 pounds heavier, and you can too. So let's do it.
I like that. The other thing that we talked about was I think you talked about like the whole eating your feelings. And we talked about it with PMS, but in terms of when you're talking about eating your feelings and sleep, I think that those two things are very much tied together. So let's talk about what would be some things if someone is struggling with sleep, which is very common in perimenopause. They're struggling with they're struggling with the sleep, they're struggling with the energy, and it's this vicious cycle that gets tied in with diet and exercise. So what are some, like, if you had like 2 or 3 things that you could tell people to think about as they're trying to improve their sleep, which ties into their nutrition, what would you advise?
I mean, first of all, you just have to acknowledge that even if you're doing all of the right things, you are losing hormones. And no amount of broccoli or avocado is going to replace that. So I think we just need to like hand it to the women who are going through this stuff and being like, there is no secret sauce out there. Like the reality is you're losing estrogen, you're losing progesterone, your testosterone is relatively increasing compared to those. Because of that, you're going to experience problems with your sleep. You're going to experience likely waking in the midsection. You're going to experience hair problems. Like there are things that like your nutrition isn't going to fill the gap with at that point. So I just first want to acknowledge that and just, shout out to all the women who are going through all of that right now and the women who are going to go through all of that. Like it's, you go through so many things that your life just be rewarded with menopause. It's just like a sick joke. But so first of all, I just want to say the overarching thing is there are options available for hormone replacement therapy when you're in that stage of your life, if you choose to do that. If you want to do that and or you want to tackle nutrition to improve these things, here's what you can do. You can limit your refined carbohydrates, your processed foods, your fried foods. We already know that. Limit your saturated fats. Increase your unsaturated fats, pulling from healthy fat sources like your avocados, your olive oils, your nuts, your seeds, all that good stuff. Increase your fiber. We want to get excess hormones aren't supposed to be there, out of there. We want to make sure that you're going to the restroom regularly. I know another common thing in menopause is constipation. That's all to do because your hormones are running out. So you want to subsidize for that by having enough fiber as well. For sleep, especially if, you synthesize vitamins and minerals less effectively when you're going through menopause, especially things like vitamin D3 and vitamin B12. And when you don't have enough of those vitamins, it's going to affect your sleep, your mood, you're going to be a little bit more depressed. So supplementing with more than the recommended daily dosage of vitamin D3, vitamin B12, calcium, vitamin C, all that stuff. You can try, magnesium supplements to help with sleep. You can try CBD supplements to help with sleep. That's like the first line of defense, I would say, for sleep. And then you obviously have herbal teas like chamomile and soothing things.
Okay, so that's helpful. What do you do? So a lot of times people in this demographic, they're stressed out. They're stressed out about all the things. And I'm sure you deal with that with your clients, but if there was one thing that you could say can help reduce stress that's like out there in today's society that you can like give a piece of advice, what would that be?
Control the controllables, and everything else, you have to let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go.
Is that from Frozen, right?
Let it go.
Okay. So let it go. Okay, so there's that. So that's some good wisdom to, you can't control everything, so you need to accept that. So I appreciate that. All right, so I have a final question. There's a lot of like shady people out there, particularly on social, who are selling their wares and making promises that they can't keep. If someone is looking for a coach, whether it's you or someone else, right? What are, say, the 3 things that people should be looking for in terms of knowing if someone is an influencer versus someone actually is going to be working with you on something sustainable?
Yeah. That's a great question, and it's certainly very challenging. The first thing I would look for, and I've also worked with a handful of coaches on my own. So some people were really great and some people really suck. And some people you invest a lot of money in and it's a waste and it sucks. And I always try to make my people and prospects feel comfortable with me, because I don't ever want you to feel like I'm gimmicky or anything like that. So I would say the first thing is their presence. If you are, on someone's page and they might have a great body, but you don't see them talk at all, or you don't see them in different angles or different lighting, and their reviews are a little bit shady, or there's any doubt in your mind where you feel like you don't actually know this person, I would say, they're probably not the top contender to be your coach. The second thing is, I guess, in finishing up with that, when I post things on the internet or on LinkedIn or Instagram, my stories, I want you to feel like when you talk to me on the phone that you already know who I am and you already know what to expect because you already know my personality. So I really try to cultivate relationships through social media, so that you feel like you know me. So if you feel like you don't got that connection with somebody, then on to the next. That's what I would say. The second thing is stay away from people who speak in definites or absolutes. Like if someone says you have to be doing this, or, this is the 100% solution that has worked for all of these clients. That's false. There's never going to be a one-stop shop for everybody. There's never going to be a one solution that's going to fit your exact needs. So that's a red flag, I would say. I don't speak in absolutes, and when I know that I don't know something, I'm going to say, I don't know. Let me refer you out to somebody who can answer that for you. Or let me go ask my network, team of registered dietitians or chiropractor, or massage, whatever it is. If I don't know something, I'm going to say, I don't know. I'm going to refer out, because I am not the end all be all for every little thing. Okay. So stay away from people who speak in absolutes. And the third thing is, if there's somebody whose values you're a little bit shady with, or say things that you don't necessarily agree with, or that you're not cut from the same cloth, I'd say that's kind of a red flag. At least how I like to do things in my practice is I like to speak with you before we work together as a client to trainer relationship, because I want to get close to you and understand you and genuinely help make the actual difference, not give you 10 pounds of weight loss and sayonara. I'm here to actually help you do this thing for real time. So I want you to feel comfortable coming to me, sharing personal things with me, knowing that you got my trust and that I'm going to give the best of me to you.
I want to thank everyone for who's listening in real time, as well as people who will be listening to this after the fact. Obviously want to thank Bianca for sharing her insights on strength training and just overall how to work with a coach. And yeah, I'll also reiterate that before starting any fitness or wellness program, you should talk to your doctor and make sure you have the appropriate clearance. Everybody has different lived experiences, both genetically and environmentally, and you want to make sure you get that right clearance to help put someone like Bianca or any other coach in a position to really help you get to where you want to be. So with that, thanks for joining this Go Long video chat. And if you have any questions or feedback, please get in touch. With that, have a great night.
Thanks, Jill. Goodbye, everyone.